Hey guys, I hope everyone is having a great day. This week we are going to talk about the steps that it takes to begin your grant writing process. So you have an idea, now what? First impressions matter, and in the world of grant writing, it's no different. Starting out, you need to make sure that your proposal idea is specific, meaningful, and has an actionable plan for what you want to do and why you want to do it. So consider how your plan will achieve positive results. Without a solid idea in place, you will never get funding. So with your idea in mind, you want to craft a grant pitch. One of this week's required readings goes into great detail about what a grant pitch is, but basically it is your sales pitch for a funder. Laying out your proposal idea this way will allow you to solidify your plan and start off on the right foot for the rest of the process. The grant pitch sets the stage for your proposal, explains the problem, and states your solution. Once it's determined that an organization's proposed program is solid, time and focused effort needs to be invested in identifying funders who are potentially a match with both the organization and its proposed program, project, or special initiative. Your next task is to identify all potential funders whose interests align with your organization's mission, priorities, and program plans. So be strategic. Sometimes you'll focus your search on grant makers for a specific program. That's fine. But to build a grant funding program that will be most productive over time, it is best to explore the entire universe of grant makers to find those that are the best fit for your organization. So don't approach this task in a hit or miss manner. There are lots of internet sites provide lists of foundations, announcements of upcoming funding opportunities, and you may run across something promising there. But browsing free sites and responding to listserv announcements puts you in a disorganized, reactive position that won't produce the best results. So you need to make sure that you are using the right tools for your search. So there are generally two types of grant funders: government funders and private funders, and that's where you should start. Okay, so for grant funders, you can have funders from all levels of government, including local, state, and federal levels. For the federal grant makers, there are several steps that are required before you even start writing your grant. So several registrations and processes that you must go through first in order to even be eligible. So that includes registering and having a DUNS number and registering your organization at sam.gov. This just makes sure that you can do business with the federal government and you have the tools to be successful to do that. The main tool to identify federal funding agencies is grants.gov. It's a free site, you can register there, but that's where a lot of the federal grant makers list their applications. You can also visit relevant federal agency websites. Sometimes they will list certain initiatives online. And once you've done all this, you might want to contact designated staff members to help answer any questions about the process or the application. Do this early, as federal grant making is typically very competitive and requires a lot of steps. One key thing to note is that these registries, so the DUNS number and SAMS.gov, can take several weeks. So put that in your timeline of processes when you want to apply for federal granting. It just can take a longer time, and if you don't start the process before your grant application, you might miss that grant deadline. You can also apply at state, county, and municipal levels. Typically, these are not very structured. There might not be a great way to find the announcement. So you might need to reach out to the local officials and ask about, do they have a grant? Where can I find that grant? You can also look at different departments' websites to see if there's something specific to your proposal. So you really need to become a detective when dealing with state, county, or municipal grant makers, and just ask good questions and reach out to your local officials to see what opportunities may be out there. Sometimes at the county or town or city level, they have an annual cycle. So figuring out when that annual grant cycle begins could be important. Funding from private organizations is the next biggest pot of money. Private organizations include foundations, community foundations, corporate foundations, and federated grant-making organizations such as the United Way. When looking for funding in this manner, you should identify if you already have a relationship with a potential funder first. This is probably the best way to get your foot in the door. If you don't know, you may need to establish a relationship with the foundation prior to making a grant application. It's kind of some research tools in order to do that. There are several grant databases out there, such as Candid or GuideStar, GrantStation, or Grantsmanship Center. You can also just Google search foundation websites and see if they align with your mission and project. You can also examine the foundation's tax returns. These are called 990s. It's public information, and they basically allow you to look at what the foundation may have funded in the past. These are required for foundations, so they're really easy to look up. You can use that Candid 990 finder. It's a free source to see if a potential foundation might fund your program. When you're examining information on grant makers, you need to examine the funding criteria and kind of keep these questions in mind. Do they limit funding to a geographic area? Are there expressed areas of interest aligned with your organization? What is the typical award amount for an organization like yours? Do they accept unsolicited applications? If they don't, you have to develop that relationship in order to get invited to submit a proposal. And does the foundation have staff? Those who are typically more approachable, and you can ask questions and reach out, versus those who don't. Sometimes foundations may say, do not call us, do not email us, just submit an application. So you've identified a potential funding source. So now what do you do? Once you find a match, begin to build that relationship. You've heard me say it, but it's the most important step to making sure that you have a solid foundation to start on. Once you find a match, open the door and begin building that relationship. And how can you do that? Well, sometimes the grant guidelines might specify how you should reach out first, but if they do not, you can do one of the following. You can send the funder a brief email, call the foundation and speak to someone with your proposal idea, invite the funder for a site visit, send a brief, very brief, no longer than 2 pages, letter of inquiry. This is just one way to reach out and start the conversation about your proposal topic. So now that you have determined that your organization is ready to apply for a grant, you have a thoughtful proposal idea, you found a potential funder, you've read all the guidelines to make sure your proposal fits, you've begun that relationship building process. What's next? Well, now you can finally begin to craft your grant proposal. A letter of inquiry or an LOI is sometimes the first step in a funder's grant-making process, particularly if the relationship between the prospective grantee and the funder is new. An LOI provides the funder with a sneak peek at the organization, the target audience, and the prospective program without requiring the grant seeker to develop a full proposal at this early stage. After the funder has reviewed the information presented in the LOI, the organization may or may not be invited to submit a full proposal. Even though an LOI is a preliminary step, it should be treated as a vital part of the process. Even though it is an integral first interaction of what grant seekers hope will be many interactions with the funders, if asked to submit an LOI, you must check to see whether the funder has specific LOI guidelines. It is important to make sure that you are starting off on the right foot with the funder. So when writing a letter of inquiry, if there are not specific grant guidelines, what should you include? An introduction section. This section should summarize the entire LOI, including a brief overview of the sections to follow. Name your organization, your mission and program, and a specific amount that you want to request. Next, you should include a statement of need or a problem statement. This describes the need that the organization wishes to meet. The third section should be your proposed program. Detail the program and outcomes expected from the organization's project and how the organization will conduct that project. And finally, you have a closing section. Identify the fit between the funder and the organization. As always, thank the funder for their time and sum up your letter of inquiry. So what is the problem that you are trying to address? The answer to this question should be outlined in your statement of need or your problem statement. This is a fundamental section of the proposal because funders must agree with the organization that the program addresses an important community problem. The need statement or the problem statement should contain accurate data, so quantitative statistics, combined with stories that provide a more personal illustration of need, the qualitative data. A compelling need statement or problem statement is often the first component that motivates a funder to give serious consideration of the nonprofit organization's request. A solid and well-supported problem statement, need statement, whatever you want to call it, is the key that unlocks the door and moving a proposal much closer to funding consideration. And finally, the unmet need and an organization's ability to successfully address it gives grant makers an opportunity to realize their own goals. So you want to motivate the funder to consider the request in your statement of need or problem statement. The problem statement or the need statement is the first impression the reviewer will have of your project and funder request. So you must make a clear, concise, evidence-supported statement of the problem you're addressing and wanting to solve. This is probably also the shortest section of your grant application. So in order to craft a great problem statement, you need to address a few things. You need to describe your problem. Think about the purpose for developing your proposal and how you came to this conclusion. Why has it become an issue? What is the history of the problem and who is it affecting? Why is it your organization's problem to solve? Next, you need to think about how you know this is a problem. It might be obvious to you and your community, but now you need to prove it. How did your organization come to realize that this problem exists? A good way to document this is to conduct a needs assessment within your community. Sometimes your local governments or state governments, colleges, universities, health systems might have some information and data points that you can include in your problem statement to help prove that it's an issue. Next, who is your target population and how will they benefit from the project? You can describe that in a social and geographical context. Sometimes you can also look at maybe other demographic information to say who is this affecting. Next, you should describe the impact to the target population in the community. Try to show a causality of the relationship between the problem and the cost to the community. And next, you're going to need evidence to support your claim. You'll need to cite your data and data sources. So you need to utilize internal and external data to support that the problem is real and can be measured. The information gathered should be factual and directly related to the problem to be addressed by your grant proposal. The statement of need or your problem statement must grab the reviewer's attention and keep it focused. The problem statement should instill a sense of urgency and compel the reviewer to want to help you. You want the reviewer to feel like they have the power to help your organization solve the problem by funding your program. Again, you should be short, sharp, and direct when writing your problem statement or need statement. After addressing the problem, the next step in the grant writing process is to develop solid goals and establish measurable objectives. So what is a goal? A goal is what the program wants to achieve. What is an objective? An objective is how an organization will know if it meets its goals. Goals and objectives should be tied back to your problem statement. It is very easy to confuse goals and objectives. So on this slide, you can kind of see a side-by-side comparison of the two. So goals should be broad, they should provide focus and vision and direction. It can be idealistic and do not have to be reached during the proposed grant period. And they can also be non-specific and non-measurable. And objectives should be realistic steps to achieving the goals. They're active and have verbs associated with them. They answer the what, the why, the who, and the how. They can be validated, and they're clear to everyone with kind of a base knowledge. And they should also be SMART, and we'll go into that in the next slide. But an example of a goal would be all adults can read confidently to their children. You can see how that's a very broad statement. But an objective related to that goal would be that 85% of first-time new parents living in Henderson County can read and have child-appropriate books in their home within 1 year of their first child's birth. You can see how that's very narrow and very specific. When crafting your goals and objectives, you want to use the SMART method. So SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. For your specific part of your goals, you want to state exactly what do you want to accomplish and answer the who, what, where, when, and why questions in that portion. Your goals and objectives should be measurable and demonstrate how you will evaluate when your goal has been met. Goals should also be achievable. You want to be able to stretch and have challenging goals, but you also want to have the ability to achieve that. So how are you going to do it and who is going to be involved? Your goals and objectives should be relevant. Are your goals and objectives tied to your organization, your mission, and your community needs? And how does it align to those objectives? And finally, you want your goals and objectives to be time-bound. So really setting dates and frequencies and deadlines is important to making sure that you're having thoughtful goals and objectives. When writing your goals and objectives, make sure you can say yes to the following. Do you have at least one goal and one or two objectives? Limit the number of goals to one to three per program and no more than 3 objectives per goal. The reason is that an organization will need to keep track of all the objectives and methods tied to a goal, so the process needs to be manageable. Does your goal and objective relate to the problem statement? Again, tie that back. Are the objectives stated as specific results that can relate to a program goal? Are there stepping stones in place to achieve success? And can everyone understand them? Next, can you say yes to, can the progress in meeting the objectives be measured and assessed? And finally, do the objectives describe the population in a specific time frame for change? Once a problem statement or need statement is clearly defined and goals and objectives are set, move on to one of the most critical parts of your grant proposal, the methods section. The methods component of a proposal serves as a bridge between your big idea and how your proposal carries out and accomplishes the proposal objectives. Methods answer this key question: how would an organization actually accomplish the work? The methods section should be realistic. The organization should be able to complete the proposed activities within a time frame stated in the proposal using available resources. The methods section should delineate specific activities that will take place in order to achieve the objectives. Methods also describe the implementation of the project, including the how, the when, and the why. This section of the proposal indicates how the project will proceed. The methods section needs to list and describe the various activities you will use to accomplish your objectives. It should demonstrate that the proposal procedures match the intended outcomes. You need to make sure that the connections between these sections are clear, logical, and also feasible. This section should be brief compared to other grant sections. In your methods, you should highlight your approach or design of your plan to discuss the methodology, the population involved, and the specific activities to be performed, and finally, the reason for your activities. In this section, it is also advisable to discuss the handling of unexpected results, to indicate where difficulties are anticipated, and to discuss how the project could be revised if necessary. You should also include a section on data collection and analysis that includes specific information on how the data will be collected and handled. Your method should also have a work plan section which outlines a sequence of planned activities. You can use charts or timelines to clarify the narrative of the work plan. So what is your timeline for this program during the grant period? That's what you're trying to address in the work plan section. And finally, you should include an administrative section. The section includes information on personnel or the agencies involved in your project. It may also identify how personnel will be chosen and who will be responsible for the various aspects in a project. And finally, if there are any rules for the project or the involvement of any other agencies. This section should indicate to reviewers how your organization, or this section should indicate to reviewers that your organization is competent to manage this project and as well as justify the need for funding. So we have covered a lot of information through this PowerPoint. You have a lot of required reading this week that goes with each topic that we discussed. I'm hoping this gives you a more in-depth look and provides examples. For this week, you have a weekly discussion forum. So again, make sure you're making an original post and responding to at least one other classmate. And for your writing assignment this week, using your week 1 organization and the problem or need that you identified from your week 1 assignment, I want you to identify 3 potential funding sources, list those funding sources out, and explain why or why not that grantor would be a good fit. Make sure you have at least one that is a good fit, please. You can look at government sources or you can look at private sources, whatever works. Next, in your week 1 assignment, I also want you to determine 1 goal and 2 objectives for your proposal. Make sure you're using